This is 8 Minutes, a podcast helping you understand the energy and climate challenge in just a few minutes. I'm your host, Paul Schuster. Puerto Rico has been through a lot. Back in 2017, Hurricane Maria hit the island, devastating the power infrastructure and causing some more remote homes to be without power for up to a year. Follow that with a 6.4 magnitude earthquake in 2020 and Hurricane Fiona in 2022. And, well, Puerto Rico is on the front edge of building climate resiliency into its power grid, installing solar, storage, virtual power plants. As a result, Puerto Rico is showing us what a future, more distributed and resilient grid could look like. To get a sense as to the progress the island has made and to learn from the lessons Puerto Rico has endured, I've invited Javier Rua onto the podcast. Javier is the Chief Policy Director for the Solar and Energy Storage Association of Puerto Rico. Javier, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Javier, I'm really excited to dig into this. Puerto Rico has really been hit with a whole bunch of stresses against their power infrastructure. It's proven to be resilient. The island has come up and shown us what a distributed and resilient grid could look like. And I'm interested in learning more about how Puerto Rico is attacking the energy transition in this way. But before we get into that, I'd love a more formal introduction to yourself and to what the SESA organization is all about.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Javier. I'm an attorney. I've been mostly a public official in my life. I initially was Puerto Rico's Deputy Secretary for Natural Resources, which is kind of like the local Fish and Wildlife Agency. I was also chairman of the local Environmental Quality Board, which is also kind of like the local EPA type agency, pollution, etc. And then in a more recent tour of government, I was chairman of Puerto Rico's telecoms regulator, which I joke, it's already a tired joke, but I say you marry telecom regulation to environmental protection and you get renewables policy and regulation, but so that's my path mostly as a public official and in between as an attorney. I was an attorney initially like in the 2010s for large scale companies, large scale solar, like solar farms. But now my current position is Chief Policy Officer at SESA, as you mentioned. SESA is basically the Puerto Rico Trade Association of the solar and battery companies. We are the local affiliate of SEA. Your listeners might know SEA. SEA is the Solar Energy Industry Association in DC, which is our kind of like we say they are our affiliate at DC. No, we are the local affiliate of SEA, and so we house the solar and battery companies that do business in Puerto Rico. Some stateside, some local, some international, fit from financing companies to installation companies to manufacturers and others in between. And we're expanding a little bit into the EV type of field because solar batteries and EV batteries are the same battery and with the same potential resiliency benefits. So EVs are also critical to this conversation we're having today. It's starting to happen and it will happen more in the future, leveraging EV batteries for grid resiliency. So yeah, our companies pay us membership dues, and we focus on policies at the legislature and the regulator, the local regulator, and also a little bit of DC government affairs work for sure.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, solar storage, they are so important to Puerto Rico's infrastructure these days. EVs becoming more so as well. I hope to touch on that as we get further into the conversation. Why don't we lay a little bit of a groundwork to start with and a little bit of history as to how Puerto Rico has gotten here, and maybe give us a little bit of a framing as to how the solar industry has grown and evolved in Puerto Rico over the course of the last 5, 10, 15 years or so.
Yeah, well, Puerto Rico, as you mentioned, is back in the middle of hurricane lane, so we're periodically hit by hurricanes. But they're getting worse, as we saw with Maria. And these 20, 25-year, 30-year events are becoming more and more common. So they're not even 25 years now, they're all of the time. So, but going further back, Puerto Rico's historical energy paradigm, actually Puerto Rico's historical governmental paradigm at writ large has been really top-down monopoly, government-owned monopoly paradigm, including power. So the PREPA, Puerto Rico Energy Power, Puerto Rico Electricity Power Agency administration was, and still is a government property. And in the 70s, Puerto Rico made huge bets for oil. It seemed it was going to be cheaper, and so Puerto Rico has become addicted to fossil fuel, mostly bunker C diesel, which is pretty dirty, and some natural gas and some coal. And this government-owned utility, PREPA, also became. I mean, it on the positive side, since it was created, back in the 1940s, it really did electrify Puerto Rico. I mean, that's a success. Puerto Rico was electrified via this top-down government-owned utility paradigm when there was money and when there was reasonably good governance there. But then that utility became kind of like more politicized. The narratives started to become. I mean, instead of the narratives and conversations were less and less and less about the consumer and more and more about the union and the labor rights. So the focus was lost. So it became politicized, overly politicized, and also a little bit of some levels of corruption, I would say also. So that's what we had before for many years and up to Hurricane Maria. We have this utility that was kind of, pathological. It was also disinvested. I mean, things were in bad shape even before Maria. So then Maria hits, and the system is leveled. We're talking 2017 here. And Maria was a Category 5 hurricane, which is the highest in the Saffir-Simpson scale of hurricanes. When it hit, it went down to a 4, but it was 4 for a long time, which is 4. It's super, super strong too. So Puerto Rico's, historical paradigm showed its weaknesses just automatically. The central system with long distance transmission, generation far from loads, and then you had to procure and also and import fossil fuel, and the ports were closed. The ports were you couldn't operate the ports after Maria. So Puerto Rico had no system and no fuel or whatever reserves it had. And these generators were very old, from the 60s, many of them. So there's nothing like a quick black start that you can do with that system, even under normal circumstances. So it was destroyed. So Maria happens, and then it's pretty clear to everyone across the political spectrum in Puerto Rico, and also in the States, I would say, but quickly in Puerto Rico, it's super clear that what we had was not working and was not going to work for the future. These types of events are going to be more common, and fuel. We already knew that the effects of the climate effects of fossil fuels and the costs of like the possibility of predicting fossil fuel prices, etc. So that realization started to create a consensus in Puerto Rico that started to become policy. First, there was a critical event, a few critical events after Maria, 2018, 2018. There was a very important process down here called the RMI Collaborative. RMI, some of your listeners might know, Rocky Mountain Institute. So Rocky Mountain Institute paired up with a local think tank called ICSE, ICSE. So that's in Spanish, but it's something like Center for the Competitive Economy. So RMI and ICSE paired up and created this really cool collaborative, multi-stakeholder set of meetings. We had hardcore left and hardcore right in there, from like the hardcore environmentalists to fossil fuel interest companies on the right, and all of us somewhere in the middle. Back then, back in 2018, I was director of policy for Sunrun. You might know Sunrun as one of the solar companies. So that's another story there. Sunrun came down to Puerto Rico after Maria, just initially to help out, just philanthropically, and they started to install like solar and storage in critical facilities, like for free, like fire stations and structures of this nature. And after a while, they also saw the opportunity, and they started to look for a person down here, and they hired me. So I was director of policy for Summer for a little while until around the pandemic, coronavirus hit, and then I moved to SESA. SESA was also born out of Maria. So the solar industry in Puerto Rico, I mean, there's been a solar industry in Puerto Rico for years, at least since 2011. Large scale solar and also some distributed didn't move that much, but there was an industry. But after Maria, it became clear that things were going to happen, and you had some companies that were already here, like Sonova, and some of the local installers, Winmar, Maximo Solar, and others, and then Sunrun that came, and some others, and then the idea came up. Hey, we have to organize here as an industry, and a guy from Missouri called PJ Wilson, he's my coworker, and he doesn't like to say he's really my boss, but he says coworker. He's pretty democratic about that. But he's the ED of SESA. But he was an organizer over there in Missouri. He's also he was a Peace Corps guy also in Honduras. So he was looking to see what to do, and he came down to Puerto Rico after Maria to help out, and he has organizational chops. He set up the Missouri kind of like SESA. It's called MOSIA, Missouri SIA, MOSIA, and he also set up something there in Missouri called Renew Missouri, which is an all renewables and efficiency NGO. But anyway, so PJ was down here, and all the companies, and the meeting of the minds happened, and SESA was also born. So you have this collaborative process happening with RMI, ICSES. SESA is already there. I'm there at Sunrun, and many others, and especially I would say, or very importantly, you had the former president of the Senate, Eduardo Batia, in that group. Eduardo Batia, for your reference, is he was the president of Puerto Rico Senate in the prior administration before Maria hit, but he was the author of Puerto Rico's first substantial energy reform in 2014, which is Act 57 of 2014.
So a very influential voice in all this.
Yeah. So Eduardo Batia is the author of Act 57 of 2014, which is the law that for the first time started to rein in PREPA. So PREPA was a self-governing, almost independent republic of a utility, even though it was, and then Act 57 creates the regulator for the first time. It was called the Energy Commission. So now it's called the Energy Bureau. So you start getting control over PREPA, and started to also rationalize its mandates to be more modern, etc. But then he was also a key figure in this collaborative in 2018 with the then vice president of the then Senate, Senator Lysol Hammer. So they created this bipartisan front because they're from different parties. They created this bipartisan front that also was very conducive to what became Act 17 of 2019, which was basically took all the learnings of that collaborative process and put it into Puerto Rico law.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because you've got Maria was something of a catalyst for change, in quite a bit of a negative way, and certainly, the island would have preferred not to have had to have gone through this process with a Category 5 hurricane. But it's really catalyzed the solar industry, as you mentioned, the RMI Collaborative, SESA, some of the different organizations that are starting to bring voices together. It's catalyzed a movement on PREPA, which has since been looked at and reconfigured into a distribution and transmission organization called LUMA and a power generation operations organization called Genera. And now you're starting to talk about some of the legislation that has come through as well. Can you talk about this legislation and the impact that that's having upon how the power grid is being structured?
Yeah, so it's two key pieces of legislation, I would say. On the one hand, you have the one I mentioned, which is Act 17 of 2019, and I'll go deep on that. But in general, Act 17 really codifies all the good policies we want for renewables, including Puerto Rico's RPS, which is a renewable portfolio standard, which is basically Puerto Rico's goals for 100% renewables by 2050, and with their steps towards that end. And it also codifies a lot of the policies around interconnection of small distributed generation, et cetera, and others. And also Act 120 of 2018, I believe. So Act 120 of 2018 is the law that puts PREPA on a path towards the maximum degree of privatization possible, you know. And I put it that way because the maximum degree of privatization possible, given the fact that this is a bankrupt utility, so it's a literally not very valuable asset, that is also legally in bankruptcy process. Thereafter, before Hurricane Maria, Puerto Rico, the whole of Puerto Rico was put inside a sui generis restructuring process because Puerto Rico was bankrupt, and federal law was passed called PROMESA, and a process to restructure Puerto Rico's central government debts as well as the debts of its public utilities and also municipalities and public corporations, and PREPA is one of those. So PREPA was and still is, it was back then at least a $14 billion debt. And a $14 billion debt and a worthless asset in terms of like the infrastructure, or not worthless, very, very little value. So you have Act 120 and said, how do we do this? But the end result seemed pretty acceptable, which is we have now as you mentioned, a private operator called LUMA on the transmission and distribution side. And LUMA is a consortium of two entities, Quanta and ATCO, that created LUMA. And then on the generation side, and when I say generation side, I mean the legacy generation plants that PREPA had, which are all fossil fueled old plants. We have this entity called Genera or Genera PR, which is associated to Fortress, which is like natural gas type of outfit. But in any case, in general, both of these entities have mandates under their contracts, which are P3 contracts, public-private partnership contract under Puerto Rico law, to modernize those things. So, and on the T&D side, I'll go deeper into that. But quickly on the generation side, it's really turning off some of those plants. Really, really, some of them are not, and then bringing in some new, like flexible baseload, including large-scale batteries, which is very important. Generating. But on the T&D side, and back to the paradigm of Act 20 of privatize as much as possible. Another great reason not to fully sell anything, even at $1, is that FEMA funds can only flow to governmental entities, right? So, FEMA funds can also flow in some cases to non-for-profit, but in general, they are designed for as government insurance. That's what FEMA funds are. So, if after Maria, Puerto Rico was going to have substantial billions in FEMA dollars, it better be receivable. So the receptacle there, the receiving entity, is really PREPA still exists, and or PREPA is the applicant, I would say, of FEMA funds. with Genera and Luma as agents. But then you have another Puerto Rico entity that coordinates everything. They're called Core Three. I forget the.
But that makes a lot of sense then, how they're splitting that up to give a little bit more modernization to the transmission and distribution side with Luma, with Quanta and ATCO coming in, and then a little bit of a strategic vision around what to do with the existing fossil generating assets, but still have PREPA as an entity so that you can still work with the U.S. federal government and the FEMA funds that have been flowing from some of these disasters. With the legislation, and as you mentioned, this goal of 100% by 2050, what it seems as though Puerto Rico is starting to check down the list around what do we do around transmission distribution, what do we do around our existing fossil generation. Now, what do we do around promoting and accessing renewable energy? And what I was hoping to do was segue a little bit into the growth and evolution of the solar and storage industry and some of the core things that SESA works on within Puerto Rico. How has that evolved since the hurricane as well?
Sure. So before Hurricane Maria, there was a nascent, solar industry in Puerto Rico, as I mentioned. There were some solar farms built, but in terms of like rooftop solar, there might have been around 9,000 systems, none with batteries. It was just like net metering, clients, around 9,000 before Hurricane Maria. But then Maria hits, and Puerto Rico is in a persistent state of blackout. It was literally the longest blackout in U.S. history for some people. I was lucky. In my case, it was like a month and a half. But I live in San Juan, and back then I had a generator, so I could also deal with things. But
month and a half without power in the middle of the largest city in Puerto Rico. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that was one of the super lucky ones. And many people were without power for a whole year, like up in the mountains. But in any case, it became pretty clear that something else had to be done. And one thing that happened under the governor back then, Ricardo Rosselló, right quickly after Maria, he put out an executive order, basically making rooftop solar totally permitless, rooftop solar and storage. So anybody that wanted to save their own life could, if they, and that coincided also with companies that were donating these systems to a bunch of people. Just there was zero red tape to install rooftop solar and storage after Maria because of this executive order that really stopped PREPA. PREPA had always pushed back, and so now there was really zero pushback. And on the other hand, it was a carte blanche. Just move with this, please. So things were starting to be installed in critical facilities and working on day one, right? Working on day one without noise, without fossil fuels, without pollution, and that was the first big step about this paradigm shift. And then, as I mentioned, you have the RMI Collaborative, and then they have the law. So Act 17, one of the things it does, it codifies and makes that executive order, turns it into law. So what that means is that in systems that are rooftop solar systems that are up to 25 kilowatts on the solar side, they are basically permitless. Your engineers, the company's electrician or engineer signs a little paper and sends it over to Luma, and it's legal on day one. Back then PREPA, Luma wasn't even there yet. But what we've seen is that almost universally, all of those systems that are being installed after Maria are with batteries. It's not solar only. It's basically universal attachment of batteries, except on some of the very large like CNI systems that they're not that many. But just for our sense, right now, Puerto Rico companies are installing around 4,000 systems a month, more than that actually, 4,500 systems a month, with all of them with at least one battery, some of them with two. some with three. And we went from 9,000 systems without batteries before Maria, and now we have over 110,000 systems, and almost all of them have batteries because many of the older ones also retrofitted with batteries. In my case, for example, in Maria, I had solar. I didn't have batteries. I had solar and I had a generator, and I had those panels sitting there after Maria. I said, "Oh my God, they are doing nothing." And when I figure one of the things that landed pretty quickly was the economics of it, because I had this larger generator, like 14 kilowatts, and I was spending. So that generator cost $4,000 just in itself, and then the propane gas that I used to use for it, it would last only like 18 hours, and every tank was like almost $80. So it was a lot of money, and then I said, wow, I can almost get a power wall here cash at the same price given the economics of these. And so I did a retrofit with Sonova of a Tesla Powerwall, and I basically pay $110 a month in a 10-year loan. I mean, $110 a month is less than what I pay for cable that I don't watch. you know, so and that's and it really changed your life in a major way. So all Puerto Ricans of all social strata started doing that, because there's this myth about cost shift and this being for the rich. In Puerto Rico, everyone is installing solar and batteries.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is because of your experience and the need for resilient power, right? Here in the mainland states, our shift over to storage and solar has been a little slower, because we're trying to pencil it from an economics perspective. We're trying to pencil it from a climate perspective. But the resiliency around whether power is going to be there or not, aside from, maybe a few hours with a blackout, et cetera, it's not really the same urgency. What you're seeing is a different economic equation.
Yeah, for sure. But even more so, it's also economic. So for sure, you're right. The main driver is people trying to save their own lives. It's resiliency. Keep the lights on. Because, I mean, almost 4,000 people died because of lack of power after Maria in Puerto Rico. Lack of basic power. I mean, like not being able to refrigerate their medicine or run their, and not a lot of power. We're talking about, hundreds of watts, not like a bunch of, it's not huge. It's running your little fridge, your respirator, some lights. But anyways, for sure, resiliency is the main driver, but also the economic expense of Puerto Rico, because not only is the grid power crappy, it's also super expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So when things are normal, we pay 25 cents per kilowatt hour. It's gone up to 33. So because of the volatility of fossil fuels and wars and all the international stuff that can vary that, because we are super sensitive to cost changes in fossil fuels. So you have the obvious need for resiliency, just basic instinct survival. Also, the pricing of utility power is super expensive. There's also a history in Puerto Rico of generator ownership. Since Puerto Rico is in hurricane lane, almost anybody that can had some sort of generator or tries to go to it, because we've had hurricanes forever, so that was the only solution. So the notion of having your own generating source is ingrained in Puerto Rico's culture. It definitely is. So you have all these factors that became kind of like gelled in a major way, and now we're seeing what we're seeing. Now we have over 100,000 batteries out there doing basic resiliency, but now starting to do more interesting stuff. So
Yeah. Well, and they're helping you to reach that 100% goal that was laid down as well, which just a month or so ago, the US DOE and FEMA came out with a report saying that, it's absolutely possible that Puerto Rico can reach their 2050 goal for 100% renewable energy. The next step, as you get more solar and storage installed, is you just installed the first VPP there in Latin America and in the Caribbean. Like, it seems like you're taking those steps, incrementally forward. How do you see this evolving into the next steps? Like what's next for Puerto Rico?
Well, just before I go to next steps, just about the current situation, as you mentioned, it's incredible. I mean, we're being pioneers in things like VPPs, but and talking about the DOE and the RPS goal, even though Puerto Rico's rooftop solar and battery market is super fast, it doesn't really move the needle at the speed we need it to reach the levels that we put into law. So to put that into perspective, even though we're installing 4,500 systems a month, since most of them I mean, most of these systems are like 6 to 7 kilowatts. So right now, if we were to measure the percentage, it's around 8% of Puerto Rico's power would be coming from rooftop solar right now. So if you add the 200 megs that are large scale solar, so we're almost at 10. Let's say we're almost at 10 with the little large scale solar that we have and little hydro and maybe there's some little fossil gas. I mean, gas from waste management and little wind. So maybe we're at 10% of Puerto Rico's energy needs are renewable, met by renewables, and we are already supposed to be on 20 by law, and next year we're supposed to be 40%.
Oh wow.
So we're not on a path to compliance because the way you really move the needle uh, in that is to build large scale solar.
Is that getting done? Are you seeing large scale solar being built?
So no, that's the problem. We love large scale solar, but it's being hit in Puerto Rico by a lot of opposition, like from basic not in like NIMBY, not in my backyard,
Hmm.
to alleged environmentalists saying that it changes water flows. Lots of bad uh, information out there, and land use protection, conservation activists. So you're having like people that are usually on the side of renewables against renewables in Puerto Rico, which is large scale renewable. And that's sad because for example, large scale batteries will save us all. Large scale batteries save the grid, help install more rooftop solar also because if you start installing larger scale batteries, and I'm talking about like Tesla power packs, you start installing Tesla power packs all over the place at the distribution level, for example, they will be visible and they might impact some piece of land. But really, the value of that is huge. So we're getting a lot of pushback on from certain sectors on large scale solar, and which is not helpful to reach the goals that we legislated for ourselves. But what is working? Well, as you mentioned, solar and storage is working at the residential level. Small commercial level is starting also. That could also start being a success story of its own. That's largely unexplored. Larger, larger. And when I say larger, I say from over 25 kilowatts to 5 megawatts, because in Puerto Rico there is net metering up to 5 megawatts. But the difference between the 25 kilowatt threshold is that, as I mentioned before, something up to 25 kilowatts is basically permitless.
Right.
But over 25 kilowatts, depending on the size and level of complexity, it starts getting different levels of government oversight. From permitting agencies and Luma itself on like studies, grid studies, etc. But I mean, things are moving. They were not moving at all. There is a batch of large scale projects that might be built, and I hope they are, which are about 800 megawatts. So if they are built, Puerto Rico would jump to over 18%, but we would still be in non-compliance with our first stair step of our RPS, which is 20%, which we failed last year.
Wow. So you still need not only the continued growth of residential solar and storage, but you need these large scale projects, both on the solar as well as the storage side, the battery side, to really start to comply not only with the legal ramifications, but just in terms of just the general resiliency of the island itself, as you mentioned earlier, you're still relying upon fossil generation, which is imported and has all sorts of variations and fluctuations according to economic conditions, in the Ukraine, versus how Puerto Rico wants as their own independent energy.
But even if we don't get it right on large scale projects, large scale storage, large scale solar. Uh, well, I mean, if we don't get it fully right, some things are happening. As I mentioned, Genera is installing some large scale batteries close to their generation facilities to give all plants kind of like flexibility. So all plants, if you put large scale storage close to older plants, it makes them kind of like look like modern plants because they can react really quickly because of the storage side. So they're doing that, so that's good. But even if we don't get things right at the larger level, and I hope we do, I think the market itself will start injecting just terawatts of storage just because of EVs. And in Puerto Rico, everyone drives a car. Every home has two cars. And when you have a market reality that some of the large manufacturers are simply going to stop manufacturing combustion engines by, I don't know, 2030 or 2035, some of them, then you're going to, just the market realities are gonna start creating this huge mobile storage source in Puerto Rico, storage resource.
Give me a perspective here as to the how Puerto Rico is preparing for EVs as a grid resource. Now we're starting to shift into that what's next conversation, right? As we're starting to talk about mobile batteries, we're starting to talk about virtual power plants, we're starting to talk about resources that exist at the grid edge and at the consumer level versus kind of centralized the way PREPA used to be.
Yeah.
How is that evolving?
Okay, so to segue to that, let me talk about the VPP first, because we're just talking about different magnitudes of VPP. So Puerto Rico is just starting its first VPP. It's technically called the Luma Emergency Demand Response Program. So as I mentioned, there's over, I don't know, 100,000 Tesla Powerwalls out there in Puerto Rico, and there's other thousands of other batteries also. But these batteries are out there, installed already, mostly at 100%, just waiting for the blackout in people's garages. And so there's this pilot program where Luma partners with entities called aggregators, and aggregators. What that means in this context is companies that control fleets of batteries. So you have Sunrun, Sonova, Tesla, and also Sonnen, which is a German company. You have these aggregators that control these fleets, and they can get a call from a call, meaning a message from Luma. Hey, tomorrow I need a discharge of your fleet, whatever. And so this pilot, it's really small. It's only for like 6,000 batteries, so it's small, and they're still not all subscribed. I think it's maybe there's 2,000 batteries in the program. It's been actually low uptake, and that goes to how much people value the resiliency, having the batteries as full. So it's really and also I think there might be a trust issue. People might not fully understand or trust the utility in doing non-nefarious things because they're accustomed to PREPA.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, I'm a member of this VPP and participant, and it's growing slowly, organically, and it's already measurably helping blackouts. At night, at basically the night peak from 6 to 8 p.m. So that's starting, and that's unstoppable. I would say. I think the sweet spot on marketing of that and also the price point and compensation. Right now it's $1 per kilowatt hour. It seems to be low in Puerto Ricans' minds. There's a $2 VPP in California by Tesla. But that's moving in a good direction. But yeah, so what's next? So I think what's next is keep growing it because Puerto Rico already has the largest untapped virtual power plant in existence anywhere. It's just untapped or just beginning to be tapped. So find the funding, I guess, to keep that going and grow it. Up till now, it's a diminutive bill charge that is really is so small that it's really unnoticeable. But I think a way has to be found to further fund this program and grow it and turn it into an actual thing that's beyond the pilot and just start using this for the benefit of all society.
Right. And it feels like this is really the first step towards talking about EVs as well.
Yeah. But what are the challenges there? So as you know, so we have Luma that inherited this destroyed grid at the distribution level and also the transmission level of destroyed grid. So Luma has to fix it, but there's no money. So the money is federal money. It's mostly FEMA money. Mm-hmm. So the challenge there is to wisely invest that money in what we call as an industry really the bottom up grid. I mean, we tell Luma, we tell everybody, just spend this money intentionally in a way that makes the paradigm that we have legislated upon ourselves possible. And this means spend this money in a way that it makes the grid fully ready to host 100% renewables at the distribution level and most of the distribution level, and fix this grid to the distribution grid to handle the amount of pull that we're going to have on the EV side, but don't be afraid, because I mean there's some pushback once in a while from the utility. Hey, oh my God! I mean we're losing. We're going to keep on losing kilowatt hour sales from rooftop solar and this and that. And we have studies that say that Puerto Rico, the net benefit of DG is actually a gain to all society right now. So if there's a cost shift, it's my self-finance solar and storage helping everyone else right now. Because in Puerto Rico, solar is stopping blackouts during the day, like rooftop solar, because we have a generation deficit. So Puerto Rico will be negative 800 generation almost every day at 1 p.m. but for rooftop solar. So we're stopping blackouts during the day. We're starting to stop blackouts during the nighttime. But we still get fears from the utility and also mostly from the bankruptcy process, saying, "Oh my God, this is the death spiral." And we tell them, "Look, not only is this not happening because the cost shift is happening actually for the benefit of all society. What's going to happen if you spend your money correctly is you're going to have a tsunami of power sales with EVs. So right now, if we already had like a large EV penetration and a bunch of superchargers everywhere, the grid won't be able to handle it. You won't be able to sell your power, and you would lose that money. So fix that grid so you make that money, you know. And also EVs are super like EV policy and EV penetration is really a progressive type of policy, because the first adopters are usually well-to-do people. So these are they're the first people that get EVs. So you start getting a lot of pull from the grid and kilowatt-hour sales from richer people. So, and which tend to be also people that have solar and storage. So they also raise their own consumption. They might have gone down. That's including me. For example, I put my bill down to when it was super high. I remember a bill that I had back in the day of like $700 to the grid in 1 month, one crazy month. But I put it down like to $80 with solar. But now I put it back up because I have two EVs in my house, and that's just kilowatt hour sales. So that's good for But yeah, so what we tell everyone that will listen, from Luma to Core 3, which is one of the agencies, to FEMA itself, you have to plan this money and spend this money, invest it widely in a proactive, to be really nerdy here, in a proactive hosting capacity way. Think of it about making the grid future proof for DG and EVs. And then keep moving up. So, spend in smart inverters, spend in smart meters, spend in the feeder system, transformers, and that level close to the load, and then keep going up. Go to the substation and to higher substations, and then to transmission lines, and then to generation. But utilities love to do top-down approaches. That's where the money is.
I would imagine that this is something of a paradigm shift for them to think about this going from the meter up versus from the generation unit down.
But I have to say, and to be fair, we used to engage all the time with PREPA, and it's not that they were bad people. They were not, but it was complex, and it was shifting goalposts all the time, and conversations would not end. It was some sort of like planned I don't know, mediocrity sometimes. It was hard to get things done. Luma is not that way. Luma is a well organized corporate entity that follows its own rules, at least. So and it follows the orders of the regulator also. So that's a step ahead. And they engage with us, and we talk, and we agree to disagree a lot, but sometimes we agree to agree, like the VPP, and that is good. And we have conversations with them all the time. Luma just did the first ever efficiency program ever in Puerto Rico. That's the other thing that's never happened here. Like actual efficiency programs, just lower the level of lost kilowatt hours out there. Just
The first ever efficiency program. Wow.
yeah, the first ever thing that is not like artisanal. They made a way. I mean, efficiency things have happened in Puerto Rico, like little things via the energy office, but a lot more can be done. So to be fair, some things have been done, but it was never a utility program. It was other entities pushing the utility to accept solar water heaters. It was the energy office or this or that. But now it's a utility program. It's the first time ever that the utility itself is doing efficiency. So they just put out some kits for. I mean, very simple. It's really like LED lighting kits for free for low income people, things like this. But it matters, and I've been telling Luma since day one. Imagine a program by Luma, your new refrigerator by Luma. The amount of old, clunky, energy hog refrigerators out there that could be swapped. And if they had a Luma logo, it would be like a marketing home run for Luma. I've been telling them that forever. But they listen, it's just a good thing. And so we agree a lot and we disagree a lot, but it's a really good, healthy conversation. And that's something also good that has to be said that's happening.
How has it been with FEMA? As you mentioned before, so much of this money is coming through the federal assistance programs. How has it been with FEMA getting them to accept kind of this bottom-up grid deployment versus the top-down replacement of what was already in place?
Yeah. For your listeners' benefit, yeah, as you know, I mean, FEMA is like a old-fashioned insurance agency, and their mandate historically has been to fix the pole that fell or fix the infrastructure that was destroyed to the point that it was to when it was destroyed. So in the Puerto Rico specific case, that would have mean build something crappy into a crappy state. But FEMA has been moving in a more forward-looking direction for a little while now, slowly, at least since Hurricane Sandy in the Eastern Seaboard, New Jersey, because there's an economic realization that if some measures of resiliency are not taken, the investment is a lost investment because it's going to be destroyed again.
Right.
It's a lost investment to federal taxpayers. So the resilient, so the build back better type of narrative has been sinking into FEMA for a little while, slowly with baby steps. There have even been statutory amendments to their organic law, the Stafford Act. But there's still a FEMA culture in there. You can change the law. There's still a FEMA culture there that is conservative. But it's been getting better to the point that in Puerto Rico, given the current administration, like the Biden administration, the Secretary of Energy, the current FEMA administrators, they are all kind of well aligned with this view right now. So they're trying to make FEMA as forward-looking as possible. So, for example, Luma, someone very intelligent, I'm not sure if it was DOE or someone at Luma, figured out how to fund advanced metering, AMI meters, advanced metering infrastructure with FEMA dollars. If you can do that, you can do anything because that's super forward-looking. like really purchasing advanced meters is the opposite to fixing a wooden pole, and so that's starting to happen. So that's a good thing. And as we understand it, there will be, and this is a piece of news for your listeners. Not many people know this. Soon, I think what we've been asking for, this kind of like intentional budgeting of things and putting a lot of money on the distribution side, is going to be at least partially heard on a document called the IRP, but not the IRP, the Integrated Resources Plan, the FEMA or the FEMA recipients IRP, the kind of like Interagency Resiliency Plan is called. And it's this Interagency Resiliency Plan, and interagency, I mean Genera, PREPA, LUMA, Core 3, and maybe someone else. So this document, which is in the works right now, is a type of budget, and it has different brackets, and there's an important investment there on the distribution side of things for a kind of like a better grid, a smarter grid. So that's good. That seems to be moving in that direction. Our squeaky wheel there is we don't know what the number is going to be. They're going to put on that, but we would say put all you can there, because and then we figure out how to rate base the rest, but if possible. But that's where the most of the money is needed right now. I would say it's really not in generation, it's really not in transmission, it's really on the distribution side. So if you have, let's say, using a round number, $20 billion of FEMA funds, or $18 billion, whatever it is, I would put almost everything on the distribution side of things just to fix the DG grid, because that's what allows, that's what would build upon the thing that is working right now, which is the growth of DG. And that would unlock, for example, bigger DG that would really move the needle. Like if you start seeing 5 megawatt, like commercial and industrial projects everywhere, that would start moving the needle quickly. And it would require less complexity than larger like solar farms, because there's really no land use concerns. They're just like huge parking lots and huge, warehouses and huge lots and huge malls, etc. And at 5 megawatts, you start moving the needle. That commercial entity starts saving money on day one, and they would have a PPA also. And
yeah, what's interesting about that is that would also unlock a lot of private investments that, right now are kind of tied up, without a distribution grid that can actually handle, these types of projects. You're just not getting the same private investment in there either.
Yeah. That's the things that unlocked small DG are, as we mentioned, the need for resiliency, the high price of power, also the no permitting, really the self permitted aspect. But one critical element that I didn't mention, or I kind of like heard it, is just the fact of the multiple financing options for DG. So like small DG, you have companies like Sunrun and Sonova. You have Puerto Rico commercial banks that are getting there. You have Puerto Rico savings and loans, which are like banking cooperatives in Puerto Rico. You also have a bunch of federal like dollars subsidies, etc. All these things are happening on the smaller side. Subsidies are really not that needed on the DG side for system, because the market is installing those at a crazy pace, a great pace. I would help commercial and industrial systems out, but usually it's against the political narrative. I mean, it's probably not possible to use like HUD money, housing and urban development, like CDBG funds. CDBG is another acronym, but it doesn't. So these HUD monies, they just can't flow to commercial and industrial interests that easily, even if they, I don't know if they can. They really are designed to flow to low income housing usually, and then FEMA dollars are designed mostly to flow to governments. So there's really not a lot of like governmental entities helping larger DG out there with incentives. There are some small Puerto Rico incentives that have happened, but they help, but they're not huge. We don't have a lot of money. But yeah, that would be a great thing if all of a sudden we can unlock commercial and industrial DG in a major way in Puerto Rico.
So my last question then, Javier, is Puerto Rico, the transformation that Puerto Rico's gone through on their power infrastructure, everything from configuring PREPA into LUMA and Genera, through to the legislation, through to the advent and advocacy of rooftop solar and storage, this need to, build this bottom-up grid, et cetera. What lessons can we learn from here on the mainland from what Puerto Rico has gone through? If you had one lesson that you would want to make certain that the rest of the United States could understand from your experiences, what would that lesson be?
Solar and storage work. It's a tried and true technology. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. I really hate it when people start talking to me about experimental stuff. I said, let's focus on what works. And then also when people come and say, oh, nuclear this, nuclear that, yeah, whatever, if you build it, right? But I mean, let's focus on what is easy to do and doable and will change the world today. And that's solar and storage.
Fantastic. Javier Rua, thank you for joining me on the podcast today. Really enjoyed this conversation.
I did too. Thank you.